I clearly don't have to ask if you can hear me. I'm not even sure I need this, but I think I have to have this. Thank you, everybody, for coming back. Welcome. I hope this is going to be a really interactive 30 minutes. If you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand. I don't need to wait. We don't need to wait until the end. So for those of you who don't know me, I am Nicole Meyer. I run the Meyer Partnership. We are a recruitment firm. I am a recruiter. I am a former banker. I spent decades in sales, the last role in roles that many of you have covering FIs for Citibank. But I have been in recruitment for ages. In fact, I was just telling somebody that Nadine was one of my first placements back in 2008, 9, something like that. I will introduce very briefly our panel. You know them. Mark sitting next to me, Managing Director for Monetigo.
Got it right.
Thank you. For Australia and for New Zealand, and Nadine is running FIs for payments for HSBC. So look, our conversation is about the Great Resignation. Frankly, I would really like to change the title of the Great Resignation to sort of what the hell is going on in retention and recruitment. What are we seeing? What's happening? What's the impact to the bottom line? And also, what's the impact to the employees? So we've agreed that the conversation that we're going to have will be from the employer's perspective. Nadine is going to take that, and Mark is going to address from the employee's perspective. Before we start, could I see a show of hands? Who in the last 24 months has changed jobs? All right. A decent number. For those of you who are employers, has anyone here seen no turnover? Anyone want to show me a hand of no turnover? For those of you who are not looking, it's 0. How about, oh wait, you have no turnover. Did you just raise your hand? Ah, so no turnover. Congratulations. You should be on the panel.
Next.
How about who has seen greater than 50% turnover? Wow. All right, that is a good number of people. There are 7 or 8, 9 people who have raised their hands. And then all of you, I'm guessing, fall somewhere in between. You can tell I'm a math major. So we're going to get started. We're going to talk about what my panelists have been experiencing. I'm certainly going to provide my perspective on it. And what I am hoping is that each one of you walk away with a different and or changed perception of what's going on, why it's going on, and what you can do as employers going forward, and also as an employee, some things and considerations for each of you. So with that, I actually want to start. And look, I can share with you lots of statistics about the Great Resignation jobs reports, but I'm pretty sure you all read, so I'm pretty sure you've all seen them. So I don't want to repeat that given the time that we have left. So I want to ask both of you, how have you experienced this Great Resignation? And what's been the impact to the business? I mean, extremely general question. We're going to drill down from there, but I'd like your initial thoughts, each one of you. So, Mark, you want to take it first?
Yeah, sure, no problem, thanks. So I guess, I've been a career banker 40 years, and I recently left, probably 6 months ago, a little bit more than 6 months ago, to join a fintech. Again, I'm not sure whether I've worked out the fintech uniform, but hey, people can critique me on that later. Yeah, I think for me, the change was driven by a few things. It was driven by COVID. I think that anybody that says they've not been impacted by COVID has done really well. I was previously working in Singapore. I hadn't seen my family for 2 years. They were based in Australia. And, there was time for a change. So COVID was definitely an impact for me. It was a reason for change. Also, I think the other reason for change, a big change for me, was around the feeling that you're not in control of your life in the same way as you were previously. And again, this is a COVID thing. And to give you an example, previously what I would do is I'd be going through about my day in, day out. But it would be broken up with various other things. You'd be going to different meeting rooms for meetings, or I'd be going out and getting a coffee. I'd be doing a run around the block, 10 minutes, that sort of thing. That completely changed. And what was happening was that I was finding everything was all about work. And people stopped respecting boundaries. You know, they'd say, "Oh, yeah, what do you mean? You know, you can have a meeting at 6 o'clock. You're not going anywhere." So things had very much changed, and I just decided it was time for a change. I needed a change. I'll stop there for the moment. I've got more to say, but I'm going to hand it over.
Yes, well, thanks, Nicole, and thanks for having me at the panel today. It's nice to see everybody back in person, human to human. I think my experience around this great resignation, you know, first of all, personally, I really struggle, like many people. I struggle the most, actually, of having to be on the plane all the time to get to work behind a screen all the time, which I really struggle. And for people who know me, I'm very extroverted. I need people. I need to kiss. I need to hug. I need to do all those things to keep sane. And when you are in the virtual world, it is it's difficult. As a leader, however, and running a global team in a very different environment, you know, COVID went from waves. You know, I love Rick's words of waves because I use that all the time. I love the wind, I love the sea, I love surfing, and I love anything like that with movement. And I think if you love movement, then you're going to be fine. That's my view. But I think as an employer, you know, we have to give ourselves, all of us in this room, a really pat in the back to have sustain the economy, the business in a very difficult environment. And we have yet again tested our resilience around, you know, making sure we can adapt and adapt quickly. So in terms as an employer, if you ask me today bluntly, have we seen a great, you know, I wouldn't be putting my hands up at HSBC because we haven't seen that great exit or exodus. It's been a movement, a healthy movement of turnaround. Company need turnaround to be healthy. And so I would say that it depends the region. I think the US have been a little bit more impacted. Middle East a little bit more as well. I think Asia is fast moving because it's the nature of what's happening in Asia. There is a lot of company opening up at a pace that is not happening anywhere else. So I think, you know, we feel some stability, but at the same time, we were already doing a lot of things prior COVID, which has actually positioned us to be a little bit more flexible and offer some of the benefits that you would expect today. I could talk about that a lot, but I do think having a bit of a head start, not everywhere around the world for the company I work, but in most places, you know, it was definitely a little bit, it eased the turnover.
So a lot of what we hear about the Great Resignation comes from like 24 months at home, 24 months doing business differently, and frankly, 24 months of reflection of, am I happy? Do I actually like this? Do I want to go back to work? Do I even need to tell my boss that I'm moving 700 miles away and still working remotely? I mean, right? I mean, we couldn't help but reflect upon where we are during COVID. And I'm curious, Nadine, you said you started some of this work before COVID, which I was going to say I find surprising, but that's not what I meant. But I applaud HSBC in doing something like this because I'm going to guess most employers were not thinking along these lines before COVID. But do you think institutions like yours, like many that are represented here today, have what it actually takes to accommodate what I believe is now a buyer's market for all of you employers? It is an employee market. Do you think institutions can actually pivot and change to accommodate what the new work will look like? Which, by the way, even as a recruiter, I have no idea what the new work is going to look like. I don't think any of us yet know what it's going to look like, except that tsunami that Rick was talking about. It's here. I mean, it is here and looming, and I think it's incumbent upon companies to address it and really quickly in terms of retaining employees and recruiting new ones. But how are institutions going to do this?
Well, I will start, but if there is a will, there is a way. Okay, so I think intent to be really focused on your employee satisfaction score, listening to them, have empathy, all this type of soft skill leadership that once upon a time didn't matter. It does matter. It does matter more than ever, and in crisis and in the future, and in this curiosity and incredible exciting world we're getting into, as Rick say. So I think there is definitely some low-hanging fruit to deal with in terms of benefits and many companies. And I think, you know, at Cybers, this subject, I hope I talked about to people when we meet, you know, is what are you doing as a company around, you know, retention, employment satisfaction, because, you know, people, it's not good enough just to say we accept this kind of standard from you. It's not good enough. We have to have much more. We need to bring home to work a little bit more. We talk about balance and work, and we have brought a lot of work at home, and now we need to continue the journey and bring home to work. And you have to take, you have to look around outside banking to look at what our company or industry have huge amount of turnover, like the hospitality, like the hotel, and they thrive in customer engagement. And they really put a lot of emphasis on onboarding and training to start with, and on loyalty program with the employee, which you know, encompass trust, and it's a deal between an employee and an employer. It's not, you do your job, I pay you. I think it is really a change of mind in terms of leadership style, in terms of benefits overall, flexibility, and let's face it, I mean, many of us here have worked in banking for a long time, but banking offers a huge amount of diversification. There's huge amount, there's IT, there's lots of skill. You can manage facility. You know, people talk about banking just as what we do in transaction banking, but there's huge amount of jobs. So I think, you know, I do believe that a lot of the companies that are here today have the will to do this. There are still some hurdle to go through because it costs to do this. And so in terms of that, you need to look at the short-term to the long-term return of making those kind of changes.
Can I just ask for another question of those of you who are here? Since COVID, how many of you as employers have actually sent out a questionnaire to your teams asking what needs to change? And maybe it's about engagement. Are people feeling as engaged as they were before? Who's actually sent something out to their teams? Great. Can I now see a show of hands of who's implemented change? Who's actually done something different to retain, or I guess recruit? Good. So most of those same people who raised their hands have actually raised their hands on both of those questions. Nadine, how did you measure employee engagement? How do you measure it, and then how do you put, I guess, a value on it to decide what changes were made, and then what changes did you make?
Do you know, when I started this many years ago on the well-being, and you know, that was the first question management asked me, how do you measure? And I say, well, we have to have a go and not measure. We will see. And I think it is about experimenting. It's about not knowing everything. And I knew that it would function, because if you nurture people, they will rally and give you the best. But you need to create that environment. And so we have, obviously, turnover is one, some of the engagement score. I have to tell you that, I will share with you that last year, you know, a lot of people were saying we'll stay because we have a management who cares about our well-being. And, you know, although it sounds pretty normal, you know, it sounds, yeah, well, makes sense. Well, it's not that. It's quite difficult to practice it every day. In every meeting you have, You have to start by how you're feeling. You know, how, not every meeting, but just do those kind of change of style. So we have put a few measures. So we do survey on a, well, we changed the frequency because if you like me, I don't like survey. I don't like to respond to survey. I prefer to talk to someone. But that's not possible to do that to everyone. But you can talk to your manager every day if you want to. So I think there are ways to retaining and measuring, but also I think we have to think that it cannot be, and not everything can be measured. Not everything can be measured. And it's a work in progress. I think we don't have all the answer yet. And as long as you prepare in your mindset to change it, to review and to amend, then I think you'll be all right.
Thank you. So Mark, from your perspective, you changed jobs. You did some reflection, self-reflection, decided this is not what I want to do anymore. I want to go to the other side of fintech or of our business. I mean, but what was the thought process that went around this? You were quite well established in banking, quite senior in banking. But what was the thought process around? You didn't resign, I mean, the Great Resignation, but your movement, because I think that's what we're talking about here. We're talking about people coming to a conclusion that they are not where they want to be. They are looking for something else. And so what was the thought process around that?
Yeah, it's interesting. Picking up, I think, on a couple of things that Nadine was saying, the organisation I worked for were very good around surveying. They were very good around ensuring the employee well-being, and it was genuine. You know, it was very genuine. If I sort of try and look at the 2-year period or thereabouts, when COVID hit, people weren't very good at working from home. The technology wasn't there. There was a lot of emphasis placed on it, making sure that the employee could connect and everything worked, and it worked really well. You know, there was some brilliant work done on the technology side of things. Then there was some great work done around how does the customer deal with us. So how do we make it easy for them to deal with us? How do we get more digital into our ways of working? That was great. What then started to happen was there was almost like a relaxation of breath, and everybody went, oh, great, we've sort of sorted all these problems out. And the foot was taken off the gas. You know, the organizationally, things were moving in a really great space. We were seeing some great digital initiatives. But then it sort of transitioned almost into being a BAU, and it felt a little bit like Groundhog Day in that there were some great opportunities out there that were just not being captured. And you could see them, you could see those opportunities, and you could see people moving from being, how do I work, into, okay, I actually now want to make this better for the customer and better for the organization, and getting frustrated because that wasn't happening. So, you know, the organization sort of slipped back a little bit into being BAU, which was a shame. And there were a number of people that left sort of around the same time as I did. A couple left before I did. And they shared that same frustration. Their reflection was that they felt that they'd been given an opportunity to actually develop the business. But then maybe the economic realities kicked in, and the organization said, actually, we sort of can't shape your business, even though there were some great opportunities to digitize. So people, I think, got a little bit frustrated by that, and they felt, you know, there's a squandered opportunity here. Let's have a look at something different. And you know, that was partly with me. It was, you know, I've been in trade and cash my entire career, all facets of it, and you know, I particularly sort of enjoyed the product side, and particularly enjoyed the fraud detection and the digital side of it. And when those opportunities were being missed, you sort of look at it and think, yeah, actually, maybe I want to look at something different that plays to what I want to do as a person. So you put aside the whole COVID piece, and we were starting to come out of it a little bit, and it's more, does what the organization want to do fit with what I want to do? And I guess ultimately the answer was no.
Thank you. I think one of the benefits, in my opinion, of COVID is that it's raised the conversation about well-being. It's raised the conversation about mental health. And I think it's caused all of your companies to decide or to determine how best to take care of employees? What can we do differently to make people feel better, feel perhaps more supported? So I want to actually talk about this concept of well-being. And Mark, if I could, we just go back this way. I mean, talk to me about, even though you are taking the employee perspective, I mean, talk to me about well-being. Talk to me about what it is that you think companies need to do from your perspective, and then I'm going to ask Nadine the same question around well-being.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's you obviously need the regular check-ins. Getting that balance of regular versus too regular is quite challenging. And I think you sort of said it. Sometimes you actually don't want to be asked at the start of every meeting, "Are you okay?" So it's getting that sort of balance between too much and not enough. So I think that's one thing that needs to happen. I think the second thing is the companies need to be cognizant of people not getting too isolated. And that's whether it's isolated from a work perspective or from a physical perspective, and they need to try and somehow facilitate better ways of making sure that people can get together. And it's not just virtual. You've got to increase that physical piece. That's got to be increased. So I think those are a couple of things. Probably the third thing I would say would be really around getting the employee engagement and listening to the employee engagement as to actually how they want to operate. Because I think, again, you touched on the point, people come out with surveys and they say, okay, here are the top 5 things, and then they only deal with 2, and probably the first 2 don't get dealt with. So, if you're going to ask people a question, you've got to be prepared to listen to the answer and deal to it. So I think that would be the third thing for me.
And Nadine, can you cite some examples of what HSBC has done around well-being? I mean, some real concrete.
Yeah, no, I certainly can. And people know I talk about this it's like a second passion for me. But, I think every employee, everyone wants to be valued. And that means something it's a different definition, no matter where you are in the world. But there's a common stock. People need to feel that they contribute, that they are guided, that they are in an environment where they're not bullied, that, and that they are protected. They need to feel safe. And I think when you create that safe environment, you create the place for people to really deal with conflict. And, conflict creates stress, huge amount of stress. So in terms of what have we done at HSBC? Well, simple thing, and I know many companies have had, we have made well-being a must in any of leadership training. We have taught leaders to have empathy. We expect it as a KPI in terms of, we haven't yet find a way to measure trust, because that's something when we talk about performance measurements, it is one of my discussion. I really feel that trust, especially in this virtual environment and working from home, is something you need to find in your employee. And, you can earn it, or you can make sure you hire people that can be trusted with the right value. So we have, gave education on the sleeping, eating, energy, stress, anxiety. We have a lot of therapists on the floor. You need a budget. If you are going to do this seriously, you need to put that in your budget. And there are some great, great companies out there to help you to insource some of that. And many, many companies have done this. But if you look back in 10 years ago, nobody used to talk about this. And now, mental health is at the same level that cancer. And we talk about it. We haven't found the medication yet for it, but we are working towards it. I think flexible hours, it was something maybe very common in the UK, but it was not open in Hong Kong, for example. Working from home was not something was palatable in Hong Kong. Or if we have an operation team in India working from home, from an operation point of view, different team, different client-facing discussion was a very big debate about can they work from home or not. Well, we were all proof, at least those who didn't believe that you could actually use the technology to do that. So I think trust, embedding leadership practice around trust and being open is something I hope we have started to change. There are still people in our survey that say, there's more to do, but there is a recognition that there is progress, and that is always encouraging.
In the time we have left, any questions? Anybody want to ask a question, make a point? Yes. He's coming with the mic right there.
I promised Nadine to ask a question. So
Oh,
I will.
no.
So my question is more on, so we talked about maybe more talent retention and existing employees, the well-being. Similar lines to that, could you also comment on talent attraction? Because I also find that a little bit challenging these days, particularly I guess the younger colleagues. They have a lot of other options, fintechs, tech natives, companies that seem to be much more attractive than coming into banking, right? So what are your thoughts on that, and how do you address that?
Are you asking me,
I am
Vanessa?
happy to answer that question. I am happy actually to answer that question because it's what I do every day. And I obviously as a recruiter hire on behalf of mostly banks and fintechs. I will tell you, and one of the questions I wanted to get to were the generational differences between all of this, because there are huge generational differences. And without being kicked off stage, and with all due respect, I don't think we have a wide diversification of people in the room. And forgive me for that, but I think this is reflective of financial services, at least our business and our industry. It is candidates will accept a role and even engage with a recruiter or with all of you who recruit directly as well, because they feel, I cannot believe how many people talk to me about the experience, and I want to look at them like, it's a job. But it's not a job, right? That is part of the problem. People are looking for an experience. People are looking for, purpose-driven organizations. And I think to myself, purpose-driven organization. Well, I'm pretty sure we're all here for profit. So I think that's the purpose, but that's not good enough, actually. I think it's how we approach candidates. I think it's the story that we tell them about the organization, what it's doing. I also have to say, and we don't really have much time left, but I will say, and I'm happy to talk to you offline or anyone offline about this, the process of recruitment, in my experience in banks, and I used to be in a bank and hire, and now I hire for banks, is antiquated. And we do the same thing we've always done. Hiring manager interviews somebody, then we cascade down into 10 other people that talk to the person. And I think it was someone
Yes,
said this
it's
to me.
me.
Nadine said it to me. She starts with the team. The hiring manager is the last to meet the candidate, but the candidate meets the team. They get a sense for the culture. They get a sense for management. They get a sense for the organization and why HSBC versus Barclays versus Citibank versus Bank of New York Mellon. I really do think it's looking at the process really differently from a candidate's perspective and actually making the interview part of the actual experience. And by the way, nobody has actually figured out how to onboard. I follow up with all candidates after they join. I'm like, how was it? I'm like, wow, I couldn't find a desk for me for about 3 weeks, and I had no technology, and I think I use words like WTF, like, why would that work like that? Regardless, that doesn't fully answer the question, but I think that recruitment, I really think people have to readdress how they recruit and really look at that tightly. We have 2 seconds left. Any other questions? I want to thank my panelists. We didn't get to all of our questions. Ooh. You just don't want to get on stage, Suresh.
The question I have is, how much of this is about the trust that 2 years things worked well in a working from home mindset, right? And then you have some large firms saying, come back 100%. Not everyone. How much of it is reflective of an employee feeling, hey, they trusted me for 2 years to work out of my basement, but now suddenly I need to show up 5 times a week, right? How much of it is they don't trust me, therefore they need to see me? How much of it is the corner office syndrome where people want to have the corner office and have their zone to manage, and remote doesn't give them the same sense of power?
Can I?
Please.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll take.
I wouldn't mind just answering that. I know from a personal experience, and this is my older daughter who's just left one of the big 4 consultants to move into banking. I'm not sure whether that's a good move or not, but anyway, that's her choice. But the reason that she gave were threefold. One was she felt she was being undervalued, which is sort of a common thing that you hear from the consultants anyway. The second one was around the really long hours that she was being expected to do. And the third thing was the trust. And for her, the biggest one was actually the trust piece. Exactly that point. She said, 5 days, for the last 2 years, I've been working at home. I've been doing, 10, 12, 14-hour days. Now suddenly they're telling me you have to get back in the office 5 days a week. And she said, if they'd said 2 days, I'd probably been okay with it. But it's no, 5 days or not at all. So that was for her, that was her biggest single motivating factor to move.
Yeah.
So point proven, I'd say.
Yeah. Well, I would say, clearly, I don't understand the concept. Let's put it that way. We certainly, want to continue balance what's right for the employee, and that's not coming back. We have been forced to, as a person, we have been forced because of COVID. We have been forced to adapt our life, and we got used to certain things and make us think, so, well, I like this. Well, there's nothing wrong with that, but I do think a little bit of balancing. I run global teams, so I'm used to be on virtual all the time, even if I go to the office. In Canary Wharf, I would still be most of the time on Zoom or in a conference room. But it's going to be an experience the next 4 days to have 10 meetings, 11 meetings a day in person around the table. So you can ask me that question afterwards, if maybe. But it is, I do think that trust has to stay, and you cannot impose. I mean, we will not impose that back to the team. We are encouraging people to come for 2 hours or 3 hours in the office to do things in person. But it's been also very interesting, and you need to pay attention that when people return to the office, what are the habits? What has changed? It's not changing. Some people come to the office, they sit at their desk, they just want to be surrounded by people. They don't want to go and on those big, round, fancy, funky table and do some, discussion and debate and yoga and things like that. They don't want to do that. So I think, every place, every culture, every country has this way of balancing, okay? But I think if you have a leadership and you yourself, you can make change. You are empowered to make them change. And you need to push. If you're not hurt, you need to push.
I will say pre-COVID, candidates used to ask me all the time, I only want to work 3 days a week or 4 days a week, so can we get that into the contract? I don't want to go to the office all the time. And I said, no, I'm not asking my client, gee, I have a great candidate, but they only really want to come to the office 4 days a week, because that goes to the trust issue, frankly, and that goes to the productivity issue. And what I told these people is just be a grown-up. Get there, figure out what you need to do, and then do what you got to do. If you got to stay home a day, you stay home a day. That's how we do it. But today, nobody wants to go back to the office. So for those of you who are hiring managers, nobody really wants to go to the office because they really feel that look, I've been productive. And the person who asked the question about productivity, I mean, when COVID started, I think we were all shell-shocked, and I think we were just really, frankly, all trying to get by. But as we settled into working from home, frankly, I think most people proved that they could be productive working from home, that they could do it. And I think if any firm is now starting to measure productivity like, well, I'm not really sure the productivity is where I need it to be, you should have been doing that a year ago. Because measuring it now and then saying you need to come back to the office, you're going to lose a lot of people. You're going to lose a lot of people who are going to say, I can find something more flexible out there. And look, that's right. We trusted everybody to stay at home and get their jobs done, and they did. Most feel they did. Whether they did or didn't, I think you have to figure that out. But it's, I think, offering flexibility and making people feel like they have been heard, that you hear them and you respect them in that way, that is the best way to recruit. I mean, there really is, it's the soft stuff. It's really the soft stuff. We are way over, so apologies for that. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your time. To Mark and Nadine, thank you very much for agreeing to be on this. If you have further questions, we're all here for days. So thank you very much, everybody.